The great court of Kalira was silent, except for the soft clink of armor and the occasional shuffle of claws on stone. Hundreds of beings from countless star systems filled the chamber, all staring at the young dragon chained in the center. Its scales were a muted silver, almost gray, and its eyes trembled as it looked around, unable to speak, unable to explain. Every creature in the room knew what was expected. The dragon must answer, must show its guilt, or it would face punishment. The dragon's wings twitched nervously, brushing against the cold stone floor. Could not make a sound. It had never learned the language of the court, and the scribes who recorded testimonies had long dismissed its gestures as meaningless. The whip lay across the floor beside the enforcer, a long, thin rod of metal and energy. No one questioned its presence. It had always been there. Whipping had always been the law. Elias Rowan stood among the spectators, his hands gripping the rail before him. He was a human, tall and unassuming, dressed simply in his work clothes, though he carried a small datapad to show records of trade routes and cargo deliveries. He had come to give testimony in a small matter of interstellar logistics, never expecting to witness a trial like this. Yet as the dragon trembled, his heart tightened. He had a child at home who had struggled to speak for months. He had seen fear, helplessness, and frustration in those small eyes. And now, in the dragon's mirrored fear, he saw the same helplessness. The enforcer raised the whip. The dragon flinched. The court held its breath. Elias could feel the weight of 100 eyes on him, but he could not look away. Some dragons in the crowd hissed softly, others shifted uneasily, but all remained quiet. The judges, tall and carved from living stone, watched with cold detachment. Their faces were unreadable, yet their eyes carried centuries of tradition. The court had always believed that silence meant guilt. The dragon's muteness, its trembling, was all the proof they needed. The whip cracked. The sound echoed like lightning through the chamber. The dragon shivered violently, its eyes widening in panic. A few spectators turned their heads away, unable to bear the sound. Elias' fists clenched. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Stop," he said. A ripple of shock passed through the court. No human had ever spoken during proceedings without permission. The judges' heads turned slowly toward him, their gaze sharp and piercing. The enforcer paused, whip raised, clearly uncertain. "Step back, human," one judge said, its voice deep and resonant. "You do not belong here." "I belong here as much as anyone who believes in truth," Elias replied. "That dragon, it cannot speak. You cannot punish what you do not understand." A murmur ran through the spectators. Some hissed in disapproval, others exchanged worried glances. The enforcer's grip on the whip tightened. "This is law," the judge boomed. "The creature must answer. It has failed to do so. Punishment is required." Elias shook his head slowly. "Silence is not guilt. Fear is not confession. I know this because I have seen it in my own child. I have learned to listen when words are absent. Perhaps you should too." The chamber fell quieter. A few dragons tilted their heads, watching him closely. They sensed honesty in him, something they had not seen in centuries. The enforcer lowered the whip slightly, unsure what to do next. Elias stepped closer to the dragon, careful not to scare it. He knelt down, bringing his face level with its eyes. "I do not know your name," he said gently. "But I know you are afraid. I know you did not mean harm. Can you show me how to understand?" The dragon blinked slowly as if surprised by his kindness. Its wings twitched nervously, then relaxed slightly. It raised one claw and tapped the floor in a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Elias watched carefully, recognizing intent behind the gesture. "This is not punishment," he said aloud, addressing the court. "This is cruelty. You punish the voiceless because it is easier than seeking truth. But look at the dragon. It is alive, thinking, feeling. Does it not deserve understanding?" The judges shifted in their seats. The murmur of the spectators grew louder. Some humans gasped, some dragons hissed softly, unsettled by the breaking of tradition. The enforcer swallowed nervously. The whip that had seemed so certain now felt heavy in his hand. Elias reached out, placing a hand gently on the dragon's head. Its scales were cool, smooth, and trembling under his touch. He did not rush, did not push. He only waited, allowing the dragon to respond in its own way. Slowly, faint biolights began to glow along its neck and chest, forming patterns that pulsed in time with its breathing. It was the dragon's language, subtle but clear. The chamber went silent, except for the soft, glowing rhythm of the dragon's message. Even the judges leaned forward slightly, curiosity breaking through centuries of rigid custom. For the first time, the court saw the dragon as more than an accused. They saw it as a being with thought, fear and life. Elias stayed kneeling, looking the judges in the eyes. "If you truly seek justice," he said quietly, "then you must listen. Not with instruments, not with laws, but with your hearts. Silence is not guilt. Fear is not crime. This dragon deserves mercy." Another crack of the whip sounded, but this time it was slower, hesitant. The enforcer's hand shook. The crowd held its breath, unsure if tradition would break or if the dragon would fall again under fear. Elias did not speak again. He did not threaten. He only stayed, a human father, calm and steady, beside the trembling dragon. And in that quiet presence, the chamber began to feel something it had not felt in centuries: doubt, and the faint spark of understanding. For the first time in the great court of Kalira, a dragon could tremble without being condemned. And a human could stand, silent no longer, and make the universe notice. The court was quiet, but the tension had grown heavy, pressing down on every being in the chamber. The dragon's soft bio-light glowed faintly, pulsing in time with its nervous heartbeat. The enforcer kept the whip lowered, though his eyes flicked nervously between the dragon and the human kneeling beside it. Elias Rowan stayed calm, steady, his gaze fixed on the judges. He did not speak loudly, but every word he said carried weight. "You are wrong," Elias said softly, addressing the stone judges. "Punishment without understanding is not justice. You ask questions, you demand answers, and when none come, you strike. But not all who are silent are guilty. Fear can be mistaken for lies. Muteness is not crime. You call this law, but it is cruelty." The chamber murmured. Spectators whispered among themselves, some shifting uncomfortably. Few had ever heard a human speak so boldly in the court, and fewer still had dared to question centuries of tradition. A dragon in the audience hissed softly in agreement, and another raised its head, curious. The judges leaned forward, silent but attentive. Their eyes narrowed, but Elias did not flinch. "I have raised a child who could not speak for months," he continued, kneeling closer to the trembling dragon. "I have watched the fear in small eyes when the world misunderstands them. I know the silence of a heart that cannot explain itself. And I see it now in this dragon." One judge's stone lips moved slowly. "Human, your words are not part of our law. You interfere where you have no right. Step back or be removed." Elias shook his head gently. "I am not interfering. I am showing truth. I am showing that silence is not guilt. Look at it." He gestured toward the dragon. "It is afraid, yes. But it is alive, thinking, feeling. Does that not mean something? Can you not see that it is not evil? That it is not a criminal?" The dragon lifted its head slightly, tilting it as if to show agreement. Its bio-light flickered, a quiet rhythm like a heartbeat or a plea. A few members of the audience gasped softly, realizing the dragon was trying to communicate. Some scribes leaned forward to take note, recording every movement. The enforcer gritted his teeth. "It cannot speak. Cannot answer. That is reason enough." Elias stood slowly, keeping his hands open and non-threatening. "And yet, you punish it for what it cannot do. You call this law, but it is fear dressed as authority. I ask you, what is law if it cannot protect the innocent? What is justice if it cannot listen?" A murmur spread across the chamber. Some dragons tilted their heads in thought. Even a few alien judges whispered among themselves. Elias could feel the shift in the room. Fear of breaking tradition was strong, but curiosity was stronger. He knelt again beside the dragon, gently touching its trembling shoulder. "You are not alone," he whispered. "I will stand with you. No one can take away your life or your voice while I am here. We can show them another way. A better way." The dragon shivered, then pressed its forehead lightly against his hand. Its bio-light glowed brighter, as if to say it trusted him. The court fell quieter than before. Even the enforcer looked unsure, as if questioning everything he had ever done. "You see," Elias said, rising to face the judges again. "Even it understands trust. Even it understands compassion. Can you not learn it too? Or will you continue to strike without reason, to punish what you do not understand?" The judges were silent. Their long tradition weighed heavily upon them, but Elias' calm courage pierced through the centuries of habit. He was not threatening. He was not demanding. He was only pointing out what was obvious to anyone who looked. Cruelty was not law. Fear was not guilt. One judge's stone voice rumbled slowly. "Human, your words are strange. Your heart is unusual among your kind. Yet your logic, it forces thought. The creature does show signs of awareness." Elias nodded. "Awareness, yes. Feeling, yes. Innocence, yes. Can you not see it? You hold power over a life that has done no wrong. Is that justice? Is that wisdom? The murmurs grew louder. Spectators whispered to one another. Some dragons spread their wings slightly, a small gesture of agitation or curiosity. The enforcer gripped the whip tighter but no longer raised it. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. Elias knelt beside the dragon once more, letting it lean against him for support. I do not seek praise. I do not seek reward. I only seek what should have been clear from the start. Understanding is stronger than fear. Mercy is stronger than punishment. Silence is not guilt. The dragon blinked slowly, then tapped the floor lightly with a claw. The soft sound echoed through the hall like a heartbeat, and the court fell into a heavier silence than before. Even the judges looked uneasy, feeling the weight of centuries of unquestioned law. You see it, Elias said quietly, almost to himself, almost to the court. It trembles not because it is guilty but because it is afraid. That is the difference. Do you understand the difference? For a long moment no one spoke. The audience watched, waiting, listening. The dragon pressed its head closer to Elias, glowing faintly. The enforcer's hand shook over the whip, unsure if he could continue. The judges whispered among themselves, the first cracks of doubt appearing in their centuries-old authority. Elias straightened, looking around the room with calm determination. I will not look away. I will not let fear decide a life. If I must stand alone to show the truth, then I will stand. If I must be the voice for the voiceless, then I will speak. And if this court cannot listen, then history will remember who chose mercy over cruelty. The chamber was silent. Even the whip lay forgotten at the enforcer's feet. Elias' courage had done what force could not. He had shown that understanding was stronger than power, and that one human, calm and steady, could make the court hesitate, rethink and question centuries of unquestioned cruelty. The dragon's biolight pulsed steadily now, no longer in panic, but in a quiet rhythm of hope. And the court, for the first time in generations, began to listen. The court remained tense, but now a quiet curiosity filled the air. Elias Rowan stayed kneeling beside the young dragon, his hand resting gently on its trembling shoulder. The dragon's biolight pulsed softly, patterns shifting in small waves along its scales. For the first time, the court noticed that this was not random. This was a language. A language without words but full of meaning. Some of the scribes leaned forward, trying to interpret the glowing signals. The audience watched with wide eyes, unsure of what they were seeing. Even a few dragons in the crowd whispered softly, recognizing gestures and movements they had not understood before. Elias did not rush the dragon. He only waited, watching, understanding and giving it the courage to speak without sound. Slowly the dragon's patterns became more deliberate. Shapes and colors shifted, forming memories and emotions. A soft pulse told of being abandoned, another flicker showed fear when threatened, and a pale glow described confusion and sorrow. The court, which had always relied on words and accusations, began to understand that the dragon had been punished not for wrongdoing, but because no one had bothered to listen. Elias looked at the judges calmly. Do you see now? He asked. This is not guilt. This is a story. A story of fear, pain, and survival. If you listen, you will understand. If you judge without seeing, you condemn the innocent. A judge, carved from white stone and etched with centuries of law, leaned forward. Its voice was low and hesitant. Human, you suggest that silence can carry truth? That gestures and light can tell a story? Yes, Elias said firmly. And sometimes they speak louder than words. The dragon has tried to tell you everything it has suffered. The whip, the fear, the isolation. It was not punishment for guilt. It was punishment for being voiceless. You cannot see innocence because you refuse to listen to silence. The chamber murmured. A few young dragons spread their wings slightly, the smallest signs of agitation or surprise. A group of alien spectators tilted their heads, confused but intrigued. Elias remained calm, letting the dragon speak in its own way. The dragon lifted its head, biolight glowing brighter. It moved one claw in small, deliberate patterns across the floor. Elias recognized the rhythm. He tapped his own hand gently to match it. Slowly, the court began to notice a strange harmony between the human and the dragon. This was not command and obedience. This was communication. A language born from understanding and patience. You see, Elias said softly, addressing the chamber, the dragon is trying to show you everything. It is explaining its life, its fear, its innocence. Can you not understand it? Or will you continue to punish what you do not know? The enforcer's hand trembled over the whip. His jaw tightened, and for the first time he looked uncertain. No one had ever stood beside a dragon and shown such calm and trust. The chamber was quiet, but now that quiet was not fear, it was attention. Every being watched, trying to understand the rhythm of light, the subtle shifts in scales, the silent language of life. One of the judges rose slightly, its stone form creaking like old wood. "If what you say is true," it said slowly, "then we have judged incorrectly for centuries. We may have punished not the guilty but the voiceless." How can this be verified? Elias smiled faintly. "By listening. By watching. By letting the dragon show what words cannot. You have instruments, laws, records, but you have never had patience. Silence has its own voice if you know how to hear it. And this dragon is speaking now." The dragon lifted its wings slightly, glowing brighter with every pulse. It arched its neck, and a long, quiet ripple of light traveled down its body. Each pattern told of hope, of fear, and finally, of trust. Elias reached out, letting his hand rest gently over the dragon's glowing scales. Together they created a slow rhythm, a quiet dialogue. The court could no longer ignore it. Spectators whispered, some amazed, some skeptical. A few dragons tilted their heads as though they could finally read what had been hidden in plain sight. The judges exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, centuries of law seemed incomplete. They had relied on noise, on punishment, on fear, but they had never considered patience, empathy, or understanding. Elias remained kneeling, calm and steady. "This is the language of life," he said. "Not words, not punishment, but communication, trust, compassion. It is what you have failed to see. And it is stronger than any whip, stronger than any law, stronger than fear." A young dragon in the audience hissed softly, impressed by Elias' courage. Another alien whispered to its neighbor, unsure what to believe but unable to deny what it saw. The enforcer slowly lowered the whip completely, as if afraid that even the slightest movement would break the fragile understanding forming in the chamber. The dragon pulsed one last time, a bright wave of soft light flowing across its chest and neck. It leaned against Elias, calm and trusting. The court could no longer deny the truth. Silence had become language, fear had become expression, and a human had become the bridge. Elias stood and looked around the room. "You have a choice," he said. "You can continue to punish what you do not understand, or you can listen. You can see the truth that has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. Will you?" The judges were silent. They looked at the dragon, at Elias, at the murmuring audience. For the first time, they realized that punishment was not the only path. Understanding could be stronger. Silence could speak. And mercy could guide them further than law ever had. The chamber fell quiet, but it was no longer fear. It was anticipation. The dragon's soft glow pulsed steadily, a heartbeat of hope. And in that heartbeat, the court began to learn something it had never been taught, that life itself in all its forms has a voice, even when it cannot speak. The court was still, the air heavy with tension and quiet wonder. Elias Rowan remained kneeling beside the young dragon, his hand resting gently on its cool, glowing scales. The dragon's biolight pulsed steadily now, a calm rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Every being in the chamber watched in silence, waiting, listening, unsure what would happen next. The enforcer still held the whip, but his grip was weak. For the first time he doubted himself. Elias rose slowly, not with anger or force, but with a quiet, steady confidence. He faced the judges, whose stone faces betrayed hesitation. The chamber had grown so silent that even the small sounds of claws on stone echoed like whispers of the past. Elias spoke, his voice soft but clear, carrying through the room. "Do you see what is happening?" he asked. "The dragon is showing you its life. It is not guilty. It has not harmed anyone. It only trembles because it is afraid. And yet, for centuries you have punished the voiceless because you thought silence meant guilt." A judge's head tilted slightly. "Human, you speak boldly. You suggest that all we have done is wrong. That our laws are flawed." "Yes," Elias said simply. "If the law punishes those who cannot speak, it is not law. It is cruelty. If fear decides guilt, it is not justice. Look at it. It is alive. Feels. It has tried to tell you the truth and you refuse to listen. Today I ask you to listen. Not with instruments, not with punishment, but with your hearts." The dragon lifted its head, its glowing eyes meeting Elias. A soft pulse of light spread across its scales, a slow wave that seemed to reach the judges. They could see the story now, the fear, the loneliness, the pain. They could feel the truth in the rhythm of its glow. For the first time the court could not deny what it saw. Elias took a slow step forward, placing himself between the dragon and the enforcer. "This is not a punishment," he said. "It is not crime. You have the power to strike, but do you have the courage to understand? That is the true test of strength. That is the choice before you. A murmur ran through the spectators. Some gasped softly, others whispered to their neighbors. Even dragons in the audience spread their wings slightly, tense but hopeful. The enforcer's hand shook, the whip now hanging uselessly at his side. He looked to the judges, unsure what to do. One judge finally spoke, its voice low and hesitant. "Human, why do you stand for this creature? Why do you care?" Elias looked down at the dragon, then back at the court. "Because someone must. Because someone must speak for those who cannot. Because understanding is stronger than fear. Mercy is stronger than power. If you strike the innocent while ignoring the truth, you weaken yourselves more than any enemy ever could. And that is why I stand here. I refuse to look away." The chamber grew even quieter. Every eye watched the dragon, every being felt the pulse of its glowing scales. The whispers died, replaced by the weight of understanding. The dragon leaned slightly against Elias, trusting him completely. Its light grew brighter, then spread in a gentle wave that filled the room with warmth, a soft glow that seemed to touch every heart. "You see it now," Elias said, his voice calm. "It does not seek revenge. It does not seek escape. It only seeks to be understood. And if you cannot give that, what is your law worth?" The enforcer dropped the whip completely, letting it clatter to the floor. No one moved to pick it up. The audience held its breath. The judges whispered among themselves, the first cracks of centuries-old authority appearing in their tone. They had never been forced to reconsider so much in so little time. One of the oldest judges, its stone carved from deep black marble, finally rose. Perhaps we have been wrong. Perhaps our tradition has been blind. If the creature speaks in silence, and if this human shows courage, maybe the path we have followed needs reconsideration." Elias nodded slowly. "That is all I ask. Look beyond fear. Listen beyond sound. See beyond tradition. You have the power to choose mercy. Do so, and you will be remembered not for punishment but for wisdom." The chamber remained still, the weight of history pressing down. Then the dragon pulsed once more, a slow, bright wave of light that spread across the room. It was not a plea or a threat. It was a statement of trust. And in that moment, the court understood what it had never seen before. That silence could speak, that courage could protect, and that mercy could be stronger than law. Elias knelt again, gently resting his hand on the dragon's head. "It is over," he whispered. "You are safe now. They see you. They hear you. And they will not harm you again." The court remained quiet for a long moment. No one spoke. No one moved. The enforcer stood frozen. The judges looked at one another, slowly realizing that centuries of punishment had begun to crumble under a simple truth. Life, no matter its form, deserved understanding. Finally, one judge spoke again, its voice trembling with age and thought. "The creature shall be freed from chains. No punishment shall be delivered. It shall be heard." A soft murmur of relief spread through the chamber. Some spectators clapped quietly, some gasped, and a few dragons tilted their heads, blinking in surprise. The enforcer sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the shift he had never expected. Elias smiled faintly, calm and steady, knowing that he had done what no threat, no force, no law could have done alone. The dragon stretched slightly, glowing softly, no longer trembling. It had survived fear, punishment, and misunderstanding. And beside it, a human father had stood, quiet but unwavering, proving that courage and empathy could silence a court and change hearts. In that moment, the court of Kalira fell fully quiet. Not out of fear but out of reflection. Not out of power but out of understanding. And the galaxy, watching silently through distant channels, began to learn something it had never truly known, that the smallest acts of kindness, courage, and understanding could be stronger than the greatest laws or the sharpest whips. The court of Kalira had never been so silent. Even after the dragon was freed from its chains, the chamber remained heavy with thought. Elias Rowan stood quietly beside the young dragon, neither demanding praise nor waiting for applause. He only watched as the judges, the enforcer, and the spectators absorbed what had just happened. For the first time in centuries, justice had been guided by understanding rather than fear. Outside the chamber, news traveled faster than light through interstellar channels. Reports of a human who had stood for a voiceless dragon spread across the galaxy. Some called it courage, others called it wisdom. Everywhere, beings paused to consider that perhaps humans were more than merchants, workers, or soldiers. Perhaps they were something different. Beings capable of patience, empathy, and insight that could change even the oldest traditions. In the weeks that followed, the dragon, still young and silent, began to communicate openly with its caretakers. Elias visited often, helping the dragon learn to express itself more fully through gestures, biolight patterns and small sounds. Slowly, the galaxy came to see that the dragon had not been a criminal but a teacher. Its fear had taught patience. Its silence had taught listening. Its trust had taught respect. The court itself underwent changes. Judges discussed reform, questioning laws that punished the innocent. The enforcer, once feared for his whip, became an advocate for guidance and understanding. He admitted that he had acted out of habit, not justice, and publicly apologized to the dragon and to Elias. His act of humility spread through other courts, sparking debates about compassion and law in systems far beyond Kalira. Elias returned to his own world quietly, bringing nothing with him except memories and a sense of purpose. He did not ask for titles, rewards, or recognition. To him, the change that had begun in the court and across the galaxy was reward enough. His child, waiting at home, never fully understood the depth of what their father had done, but Elias knew it had been right. He had spoken for the voiceless, shown courage without violence, and trusted that truth could shine even in the darkest traditions. The young dragon, once trembling and silenced, became a symbol of hope. In many star systems, it was said that dragons and humans could build trust, that patience could replace fear, and that understanding could replace cruelty. Children across worlds read stories of the human who had dared to stand, and teachers told tales of the court that had finally learned to listen. For Elias, it was never about fame. One evening he sat quietly in his home, watching his child play with small toys shaped like dragons. The memory of the trembling dragon and the glowing biolight patterns stayed with him, a quiet reminder that life, even in forms we do not understand, has value. He smiled softly, thinking that perhaps the galaxy had learned something more than admiration. It had learned a lesson in humanity. Even distant leaders, observing through holographic channels, discussed the trial of Kalira. They marveled at the courage of one human standing for truth and mercy. Some adopted policies to listen to the voiceless, some reconsidered harsh punishments, and some simply reflected on the power of empathy. Elias' act rippled farther than he could imagine, creating waves that crossed systems, species, and centuries of law. The young dragon grew stronger each day. Its voice remained soft, but it no longer trembled when speaking or moving. When it glowed, the biolight patterns now expressed confidence and hope rather than fear. Elias visited whenever he could, sharing quiet moments of friendship and trust. And each time, he reminded the dragon that silence was not weakness and that patience could change hearts more than any force ever could. In time, the story of Elias and the dragon became legend. Artists painted scenes of a human kneeling beside a glowing dragon, judges leaning forward in thought, and spectators witnessing the power of courage without violence. Poets wrote of trust that could silence a court, and historians recorded how one human showed that empathy could surpass law. Across the galaxy, beings of all species began to see humanity differently, not as conquerors, traitors, or soldiers, but as a species capable of quiet bravery, compassion, and understanding. Elias never sought recognition. He remained a simple caretaker, a father, a man who had acted because it was right. Yet the galaxy remembered him anyway. Stories were told, songs were sung, and records were kept. Every time a court considered punishment without understanding, someone whispered the tale of the human who refused to look away. And every time a dragon felt afraid, somewhere, there was hope that a human might stand beside it, patient and steady, to show that silence could be heard and that fear could be met with courage, not cruelty. The young dragon looked up at Elias one quiet evening, its glowing scales pulsing gently. In its eyes was gratitude, trust, and a reflection of the human who had changed the court of Kalira forever. Elias knelt, resting a hand on the dragon's head. "We did it," he whispered. "We showed them the truth. The galaxy can learn, if it chooses to." And the galaxy did learn. Slowly, quietly, and without force. Across distant worlds, courts and leaders reconsidered tradition. Across starships and settlements, humans and dragons built new bonds. Across the hearts of many, the lesson spread. Understanding, courage, and empathy could shape the future far better than fear, power, or law. Elias walked away that day, the dragon following closely beside him. He did not know what the future would bring, but he did not need to. One human had shown what could be done. One act of courage had started a wave that the galaxy would remember for generations. And in every quiet moment, in every patient word, and in every act of trust, the lesson remained clear. Humanity had the power to change the world, not through war or force but through courage, compassion, and the willingness to listen to the voiceless.